everyone, it's Sam, aka Ocean Unknown, and welcome back to my channel. This is yet another video about the wonderful series Danganronpa Despair Time, but this time I will be analyzing one character and their impact on the story. So I hope you all enjoy the video, and let's get started.
Oh, please don't think I'm weird.
Veronica Grebenshchikova is one of the 16 students who were kidnapped and forced into the killing game show Danganronpa Despair Time. She is the ultimate horror fanatic, and as the Danganronpa Despair Time website states, she is constantly in pursuit of the thrill of being scared. This interest in fear gave her an admiration for the horror genre, which got the attention of Hope's Peak Academy, who gave her the title of the ultimate horror fanatic. However, she has the tendency to get carried away when discussing her love of horror. She's just like me. Her birthday is August 7th. She enjoys skateboarding and dislikes boredom. The creators of Despair Time have also shared details about Veronica in their end of July Q&A, including that she's pansexual and her one green earring is a good luck charm from her best friend. She was first introduced in Despair Time during the first episode of the prologue when Tereko and Xander encounter the other 14 students, who are all very confused about what they're doing in a mysterious building when they're supposed to be at the Hope's Peak Academy orientation. Veronica says, "Maybe the Academy is trying to surprise us. Wouldn't that be fun?" Which really sets the tone of her character's attitude towards dire situations. Above all else, Veronica wishes to enjoy herself. In the very next episode, Xander and Tereko introduce themselves to Veronica, as she explains that she got her talent by being a scholar on the cultural influences of the horror genre, as well as the psychology of fear and other emotions, which fascinate her. However, before Tereko and Xander can ask Veronica if she knows anything about the unexpected circumstances they're all in, she immediately goes on a tangent about a book she's reading called Forever Dead. She explains that the book is about a boy stuck in a time loop watching his friends die, and while he is mortified at first, he becomes more and more concerned with his own boredom, causing him to fall into insanity. She continues talking about the book for a while until she notices how uncomfortable Tereko and Xander are, as she exclaims, "Oh no, I know I did it again!" She apologizes for rambling, explaining that she easily gets carried away when discussing her interests. Xander quickly forgives her and says he admires her dedication and passion for horror, with Tereko joining in and saying the book sounded interesting. Upon hearing that Tereko thinks the book sounds fascinating, Veronica immediately goes back to rambling about it for several minutes. Tereko says it felt like an hour in her head, before saying that Veronica basically spoiled the book for her and moving on to discuss the mysterious situation they're in. Veronica compares the unease of the situation to an idea for a movie, and is intrigued by the mystery of how they all got to this suspicious building. She then says, "Maybe we'll find out that we're all forced to kill each other in cold blood. Wouldn't that be exciting?"
That's called foreshadowing.
Tereko says exciting isn't really the word she would use, and Veronica says she just meant it hypothetically or from a fiction point of view of wanting a compelling story. Xander and Tereko leave her to talk to the next person, in which Tereko says she's a bit strange to say the very least. Oh my god, like the name of this video. Tereko even questions Veronica's comment about them being forced to kill each other and saying it can't possibly be foreshadowing of what will happen next, because that would just be silly.
That's called foreshadowing.
And in true foreshadowing fashion, Veronica is the first to understand in episode 5 of the prologue that the reason the students were brought to this mysterious place is in fact to kill each other via a killing game TV show. Moving on to chapter 1, Veronica joins everyone else investigating and wondering how they've ended up here without years of their memories and have been thrown into a killing game. While Veronica's presence in this little scene is not too important, I wanted to point out this one line she says. When telling Xander that it might not be the best idea to continue investigating while he's tired, she says, "A little danger can get your adrenaline into your system and wake you up."
That's called foreshadowing.
Wow, that sound effect is really getting its use today. Later on, when the group is trying to open the elevator, Veronica says that she thinks it's best if the fittest people try their shot at opening the elevator, saying she used to be quite the outdoors person. We don't see Veronica compete in RA's arm wrestling contest to open the elevator, but Veronica gets to move on to the second round immediately because Nico didn't want to compete. In the aforementioned Q&A, the makers of Despair Time said that Veronica has an average amount of strength alongside Jay, David, and Nico, so we can assume that she would have done okay in the arm wrestling contest if Xander didn't absolutely obliterate Ace's hand.
I'd rather die than not be able to eat cereal with my hand!
The next time we see Veronica is at the end of Chapter 1, Episode 4, when Tereko finds her bugging Arturo in the computer lab. Veronica is pressuring Arturo to watch a movie with her so she can get the opinion of a medical professional. Arturo is completely opposed to the idea. So you may be asking, what movie does Veronica want him to watch? Well, in the true fashion of Tom Cardy's song Red Flags, she wants him to watch The Human Centipede since it's about a doctor. Arturo is irritated that Veronica would connect his work of cosmetic surgery to a doctor doctor in a horror movie, and he becomes even more grossed out when she tells him exactly what the doctor does in this movie, which honestly, this is the only time I agree with Arturo. Veronica keeps pressuring him to watch the movie, but she then says, actually, it's a terrible movie, but it's fun to think about. Terrico agrees with Arturo, but Veronica then picks a new movie, this time one about a surgeon performing extreme and sometimes illegal body modification. She is referring to the 2012 film American Mary, which Arturo once again protests because he says he's just a regular plastic surgeon. As Arturo tries to explain his questionable views on appearance to Terrico and Veronica, Veronica theorizes that Arturo had a natural aversion to people he deemed unattractive before becoming a plastic surgeon, and that his job and exposure to impossible beauty standards caused his prejudice to grow even more to the point that it took over his personality, then comparing him to boiling a frog. Arturo was taken aback by Veronica's hypothesis, as Veronica exclaims, "Did I get it right? Dissecting your brain is so fun. This is way better than those movies I wanted us to watch." Arturo storms out of the computer lab, and Veronica at first is still smiling from the fun of psychoanalyzing Arturo, but then her expression changes to embarrassment as she realizes she scared him away. She says, "I was so excited by what I was talking about that I didn't realize that I might have been creeping him out. I always end up doing this kind of thing." Terrico reassures her that it's okay because Arturo is kind of a jerk, but she admits she was freaked out by the movies Veronica wanted to watch. Veronica then says, "Huh? But that is the point of horror, is it not?" Terrico advises her to talk about lighter topics to not freak people out, and Veronica understands that it would be better to start with beginner horror topics, which excites her. She then asks Terrico if she wants to watch a movie with her, and picks a tame one that, in her words, has no cannibalism, mutilations, or gratuitous vomiting scenes. Terrico declines because she has chores to do, and while Veronica is a little bummed, she understands as Terrico heads out of the computer lab. In Chapter 1, Episode 5, Veronica is seen enjoying the cake Eden, Rose, Terrico, and Min made, exclaiming that the knowledge that her friends made the cake makes the cake taste even better. 2 episodes, 1 murder attempt, and 1 actual murder later, Terrico asks Veronica for her alibi, in which Veronica says, "Tell me, Terrico, how does it feel to almost be the first murder victim? Are you confronting your own fragile mortality right now?" Once again, flustering Arturo, who is also with her. Veronica explains that during the time that Xander was killed, she was showing Arturo and Ace a horror movie in the screening room, which Arturo butts in to say she strong-armed them to watch it with her. She continues saying that the movie ended a little before 8 p.m., so when she left and walked past the computer lab, she was the first to discover Xander's corpse. Terrico expresses a little bit of anger towards Arturo, Ace, and Veronica for not being as attentive as they could have been, and Veronica apologizes and says she feels like Xander's death is somewhat her fault. She continues explaining that Arturo found the body right after her, and because they don't trust each other, they both went to alert the others that Xander was dead. Veronica says it likely wasn't enough time for someone to tamper with the crime scene or any evidence, and when asked where Ace was in all of this, she says he fell asleep or passed out due to fear while watching the movie. She says she doubts Ace could have done anything during this time since he was asleep, as Terrico leaves her to get everyone else's alibis. Not long after, the first trial begins. At the start of the trial, Veronica sides with everyone else to accuse Terrico of killing Xander, as she is the one who first brings up the idea that Terrico and Xander fought to death in the computer lab. After Terrico has her little anti-hero moment, the students move on to discussing the weapons given to them, in which Veronica's given weapon, a collection of horror movies, is questioned for if it is even a weapon. Ace shrieks and says horror movies are deeply psychological weapons that caused him to almost die. Veronica then, out of nowhere, says, "Maybe in a fantasy world you could use the megaphone to shoot robot bears," which is a reference to the Danganronpa game Ultra Despair Girls. Levi, being the amazing himbo he is so confused, but everyone gets back on topic. Veronica quickly points out that Terrico's weapon is a knife, and it's too big of a coincidence to overlook that Xander was stabbed with a knife, but Terrico quickly debunks Veronica's notions as the weapon used on Xander was a kitchen knife, not a hunting knife like she was given. However, Veronica continues going down the path of her theory by mentioning priming, the psychological phenomenon in which exposure to one stimulus influences how someone reacts to related stimuli in the future. With this information, she says Terrico picked a kitchen knife to kill Xander because she was influenced by the fact that she was given a hunting knife at the beginning of the killing game. Once again, Terrico deflects this information as purely speculation. Eventually, Terrico helps everyone understand that the given weapon she and Xander had nothing to do with the case, but Veronica is not fully convinced that Terrico is completely innocent. In the debate scrum, Veronica is on the opposing side with Levi, Min, R.A.J., Who, and David, as they believe Terrico is the killer. She claims that since the knife was found in Terrico's hands when the body was discovered, she must be the killer, which is debunked by Rose, who says Xander's hands and the bloodstains on the floor tell a different story. After everyone has accepted that Tereko isn't the killer, they start looking over the DVD found at the crime scene. Veronica is quickly intrigued by the DVD, wondering if the letters of it are a cipher to who the killer or even the mastermind is. When it's found out that the secret message means Charles Cuevas' motive, Veronica piques interest in what was on the DVD, but is discovered to be completely blank. As the group discusses if Charles could be the killer and why he's been acting so strangely, Veronica suggests that Charles' behavior is caused by trauma from his childhood, in which Wade reveals that Charles has hemophobia and freaks out when he sees blood and gore. It is highly suspected that Charles' phobia stems from trauma, as in later episodes it is revealed that he lost his brother whom he can't remember, he alludes to having childhood amnesia, which is often caused by childhood trauma, and the creators of Despair Time have also alluded to Charles having trauma. In the Q&A, they state that the scar on Charles' arm is from a dog biting him, but he thinks it's a birthmark, and by stating that Charles' brother, Ellie, looks suspiciously like Charles does now before passing away. They also specifically mention that Ellie's favorite animal are dogs, which I believe has something to do with Charles' dog bite on his arm. So technically,
That's called foreshadowing.
moving on, it is revealed that Charles found his fake motive video and went to the computer lab to watch it, since it's the only place to go with DVD players other than the screening room, but Arturo, Ace, and Veronica were occupying the screening room. Everyone gets kind of creeped out by Veronica saying she'd prefer to watch her motive video in the screening room to experience a full visceral feeling. Later on, Veronica seems intrigued by the fact that Xander was asked by someone else to kill Tereko, and predicts that it has some importance to the case. She suggests analyzing the handwriting of the letter found in his pocket, but everyone thinks it won't be helpful, especially David and Tereko.
David asked him to do it.
Then, Veronica says Tereko doesn't want to discuss Xander's motives and doesn't want to see him as anything more than a piece of evidence, further saying, "Isn't that right, Tereko? You really feel hurt by his betrayal, don't you, Tereko? Or has that underlying resentment always been there?"
Tell me! Oh, I want to take a peek inside your mind so badly. It's driving me crazy.
Anyways, Veronica is the first to bring up the idea that the killer was unprepared to kill someone and acted impulsively because they used the letter in Xander's pocket for the forged out of order sign rather than having their own piece of paper. Because of this, Veronica also brings up the idea that the killer was potentially trying to save Tereko's life from Xander's hands. She then says, "Isn't that the underpinnings of a beautiful story? That the culprit stumbled across the crime scene, saw Xander standing over the body of Tereko Tawaki, and decided that they would bloody their own hands solely to save Tereko? You're alive and standing here right now because one of us decided to put your life above Xander's, but now you're doing everything in your power to put your savior to death."
Isn't that just wonderful?
Ace is very creeped out by Veronica's accusation, saying she gives him secondhand nightmares, in which Veronica says, "It's just a theory, a Tereko theory. Thanks for watch. I need to stop doing my terrible MatPat impression of these videos." When Min is exposed as the culprit, everyone for the most part doesn't believe Min would ever do such a thing. Veronica then says, "Then who is the type to commit a murder in your mind? Anyone is capable of killing when placed in the right conditions," in which she absolutely has a point. She then goes further into the idea that Min killed Xander unexpectedly, saying that Xander likely saw Min witness him stab Tereko, and Min's fight or flight response kicked in as she felt if she didn't do something, Xander was going to hurt her too. Continuing, Veronica explains that she likely first threw the water she was holding onto him and then turned off the lights to coerce Xander to touch the light switch and then get electrocuted. After the weapon is discovered to be Min's pen that has a secret switchblade inside it, Veronica explains the concept of inattentional blindness to explain how RA was able to pickpocket Min to retrieve her pen and discover the hidden switchblade. As Min further and further starts to feel defenseless, Veronica says she's lost it now, hasn't she? The dawning realization that she's cornered is causing her to lose that carefully cultivated cool facade. This is amazing! Watching someone lose their sanity as they desperately claw towards an ever-dwindling hope for survival. It's so much better than any story I could have ever read. Min is voted correctly as the culprit, and Veronica says, "In the end, someone like you was the first blackened? Even I'm a little surprised by this outcome." After Min is thrown to the dogs, Veronica says that Min died in such a cruel way, which is ironically followed by Mono TV asking if her death was entertaining. Moving on to Chapter 2, Veronica stays with the group for the entirety of the first episode, eating breakfast and then wanting to end the killing game before any more of the secrets are revealed. In episode 2, Tereko finds Veronica in the playground on the second floor as she asks Tereko to play with her, which leads to, unironically, one of my favorite scenes in Danganronpa Despair Time. She then points out that the spring ride looks just like Monokuma, the mascot of the Danganronpa series, which Teriko says she's seen in history class before. Mono TV then says,
"You are my dad. You're my dad. Wookie, wookie, wookie."
But it's a lie. Monokuma is not his father.
Do I look?
However, Veronica makes an inference that Mono TV was designed to look like Monokuma to incite fear in the Ultimates because black and white designs were common during the tragedy, a time of despair present in the canon Danganronpa games, in which Despair Time follows the timeline of. Because of this, black and white designs became a symbol of calamity for generations, even influencing films and art after the tragedy, and more people became afraid of objects that look like Monokuma, kind of similar to how Jaws caused the fear of sharks to skyrocket. Veronica explains that she loves to study how horror media and fear influence culture, and Teriko starts to understand that Mono TV was designed to incite fear in the students, but also to reference that past killing game. Veronica is confused by what she means, as nothing like this has ever happened that she knows of, and thinks she's just referring to the high murder raid during the tragedy. It is unclear what Teriko is exactly talking about here, and why Veronica doesn't know anything about it, but I got a couple theories. For one, it's possible that the existence of Danganronpa was erased from the students' minds when their memories were wiped, but Teriko somehow knows about / remembers it. Second, Teriko could be talking about a past killing game that only she was in, which is a very popular theory that Teriko was never meant to be with the Ultimates in Despair Time. And lastly, Hope's Peak in this version of the Danganronpa universe hid the existence of the Ultimate Despair in order to keep their reputation, specifically so they could build more schools across the world, since Despair Time doesn't take place in Japan, where the original Hope's Peak was. As Teriko is about to leave the playground, Veronica sulks and wants to play with her, but quickly says she's going to annoy Arturo and ask him to play with her. In episode 4, Veronica sees everyone fighting in the cafeteria, and Teriko and Eden ask for Veronica's help to break up the fights. She goes up to Ace and Nico, and she comments on how much Ace has changed since Xander and Min died. She says that Ace's anger at Nico is caused by his fear that after witnessing 2 people die, he could be next. This leads to Veronica just upfront threatening Ace by saying anyone contemplating murder would most likely go after someone disliked and confrontational, saying, "You know what that means for hostile, rude people like you, right?" When Nico questions if Veronica is threatening Ace's life, she says, "Not at all. I'm simply using the fear of violence to incentivize good behavior." Ace gets really annoyed by Veronica's actions, and when she replies,
You've demonstrated a sudden sense of self-awareness and understanding of others today. Why are you still so argumentative?
When David reveals his secret to break up the fights, Veronica is quite shocked with his upfrontness, and she seems on board with his idea for everyone to just confess their secrets and get it over with. When Charles' secret is revealed, she is intrigued by his visceral reaction and by his secret that his older brother died, but Charles doesn't remember him at all. We don't see Veronica again until Chapter 2, Episode 7, when she asks Nico how far they were willing to go with their attempt on Ace's life, and then much later in the episode, Teriko goes to the screening room and watches one of the movies in Veronica's collection.
Having fun? Gosh, you have quite a strong fight reflex. Oh, and a strong arm.
Veronica claims she wanted to know if Teriko was enjoying the movie, and Teriko expresses her anger that Veronica snuck up on her while knowing that she was backstabbed only a few days ago, which freaked her out.
When you put it like that, it does kind of seem like I'm in the wrong here. You are!
After getting up, Veronica continues to ask Teriko if she liked the movie, saying it reminded her of Teriko. She claims the main character looks like her, but Teriko disagrees because they have different hairstyles, eye colors, and skin tones. Veronica questions if Teriko only identifies people by hair and eye color in different clothes, which makes her wonder if Teriko has prosopagnosia, also known as face blindness. She asks her, "If I wore contacts, a wig, and different clothes, would you recognize me?" Which Teriko sees no point in asking, since to her it's an irrelevant question. She then says, "Or perhaps do you refuse to see yourself in the protagonist because she strikes too much of a chord to you? Does the movie's overarching theme of betrayal hit too close to home?" Teriko replies, "Veronica, why are you always doing this? You're always trying to do some strange psychoanalysis on people in a way that's almost specifically calibrated to make everyone uncomfortable." Veronica is a little taken aback by Teriko saying she makes everyone uncomfortable, in which Teriko says, "Yes, very much. Have you really never noticed?" She says she has, but she can't stop herself from doing it because it's so much fun to her. She then says, "I'm the kind of person who gets bored very easily. That's why whenever I find something that's exciting, I can't help but get addicted. That's why I liked horror for such a long time. The genre aims to elicit base negative emotions out of you like fear, disgust, or sadness, and that's exciting. But after a while, fiction is only fiction. In the back of your head, you always know that there are no consequences for anything that happens. The idea that I could screw up my life at any time that I could make a fatal mistake that I can't undo. That's real fear, so it excites me. Tereko becomes concerned that Veronica enjoys the killing game they're currently in, and while she doesn't answer that question, she says that Eden came up with an idea for how to end the killing game that hypothetically could work. She explains that since the killing game is a televised game show, the plan is to make the show as boring as possible so they'll lose all their viewers and be forced to shut it down. While Tereko can see how the plan would work, it has quite a few roadblocks, including that Veronica just said she can't stand being bored. She admits she might do something selfish, but Tereko says she wasn't thinking about Veronica as the main problem for this issue. She was considering how everyone has been behaving recently, likely referring to specifically the more aggressive, hostile students like Ace, Arturo, and RA. Veronica says this plan probably means nothing to Tereko since she admitted she didn't want to leave back in Chapter 2, Episode 1, but Tereko says she meant that she wants to end the killing game yet stay in the building she's in. Tereko admits she has a high-risk, high-failure idea on how to end the killing game, which makes Veronica very curious. I'm curious, yeah! However, Tereko refuses to tell her the plan and says she'll understand when the next person is killed. Veronica is concerned for Tereko's certainty that another murder will happen, in which Tereko says that it's obvious a murder will happen since the tensions have been so high the past 3 days. Veronica then asks if Tereko is worried that her secret will be revealed, and Tereko says she has way too many secrets that she'd like to hide from both others and herself, but because she has so many secrets, she doesn't know what her secret is, and also the person who received her secret hasn't reached out to her. She then asks how Veronica is feeling and whether she knows her secret or not, in which Veronica deflects and says she'll find out tomorrow. She also expresses how excited she is to see what will happen. After everyone discovers RA's body, they all start investigating immediately. Veronica is very adamant in helping as she assists Arturo in discovering the cause of death, which Veronica says was a broken neck caused by intense force and strength. Tereko accuses Veronica of trying to mislead her because Min in the previous trial tried to deter Tereko from discovering that Xander was electrocuted. She says the less anyone tries to force her speculation, the better. Veronica understands her concerns, but also says that keeping an open mind is good for the investigation. All of a sudden, Veronica gets an idea and wants to test it out.
Ow! What the?
I see.
What do you think you're doing? Ow!
Veronica explains that she was testing whether ripping off adhesive on someone's skin would leave a mark, which, yes, it does. She then points out RA's wrists, which are suspiciously more red than the rest of her body. With this piece of evidence, Veronica suggests that it's possible that RA was bound by the wrists sometime before being killed. Moving on to the class trial, the students start revealing whose secrets they received. When it is Veronica's turn, it is revealed that the secret she received is, "You were quite the hopeless child. Dying once wasn't enough, so you attempted suicide 3 times. However, Veronica refuses to reveal whose secret it is, saying, "A little mystery makes this trial more interesting, don't you think?" After everyone has their turn to expose the secret they received, Tereko is quite irritated that some people, including Veronica, either didn't reveal their secret or seemingly used the dead as an excuse. David. Veronica admits she kept her message a secret because it makes things more interesting, saying, "It's not every day that we get to solve a murder. Shouldn't you savor these few class trials that we have? It'd be a massive shame if it went by too quickly and without any intrigue. At most, you'll experience only 5 more of these trials, and certainly much less if you die earlier. And the more trials happen, the less people there will be. This is the last time we'll have to solve a murder with this many people. I want to make sure I'm not disappointed." Everyone condemns her for her reasoning, in which she replies, "A story's no good if there are no stakes involved." As the discussions continue, Veronica is among the few whose secret is unknown, and she has also not revealed whose secret she received. As Tereko and Ace argue over how to discuss the secrets and figure out the mystery ones, Veronica interrupts to ask if Ace's secret is the one Nico received. "Your body is falling apart, but you still refuse to eat." Ace is terrified at how Veronica knew this information, in which Veronica says, "It was just obvious." She goes on to explain that jockeys have extreme weight limits in their profession, which causes there to be a high percentage of eating disorders among jockeys. However, she right after admits that she just guessed Ace's secret and that his reaction confirmed that it was in fact his. Veronica suggests that everyone should guess the remaining secrets and see if they stick, but Jay calls her out on her hypocrisy, Toby since she has yet to reveal what secret she received as well as her own secret. She is quick to snap back at Jay, asking what she would have done in her position and calling her out on her own hypocrisy since she wanted to keep her last name a secret before being outed as Maria Bella Rosales' daughter by Arturo in Chapter 2, Episode 1. David then backs up Jay, saying that guessing people's secrets at whim would just cause more animosity and fighting. As the conversation moves to Nico confessing that they did try to kill Ace, Veronica once again is intrigued by Nico's attempt on Ace's life and continues to ask them how prepared they were. The trial continues as it is revealed that Arturo threatened Eden because she received his motive secret, in which Veronica encourages them to keep fighting in the trial room. After Eden recalls everything that Arturo did and said to her in the infirmary and Arturo snaps in the trial room, Veronica says, "Arturo, you're so fascinating. You're really entertaining, so I'll take your side. I don't care about morals. I don't care about whether people get hurt or whether they die. I just need to be entertained. If you become more and more irredeemable, then I'll only love you more. I want to hear about all of those terrible things you did with no justification." Everyone immediately agrees that Veronica's support for Arturo just makes him look even worse than he actually is, if that's even possible. With this even more cruel side of Arturo established and out in the open, everyone starts accusing him of killing R.A., but Veronica says that he has to have an alibi. Jay, even more annoyed, realizes that during the time frame that R.A. could have been killed as established at this point in the trial, Arturo was following her around. While on the topic of alibis, Veronica states that she was watching horror movies with Terrico during the time frame of R.A.'s murder. In the final episode thus far, Veronica defends Ace by saying that David's supposed motive of having a family history of depression isn't one of the 16 received secrets, and she points out that while this could have been an innocent mistake David made since he didn't know which of his secrets would be used, but it's also possible that he intentionally lied. And then of course we all know what happens next.
Say it, Foxy! I'm a lying, manipulative, scumbaggy piece of shit. Is that what you all wanted to hear?
After David reveals his true nature to his peers, Veronica is enamored by David saying, "You had so much stuff pent up inside of you, that's so cool." And this is the last time, so far, that we see Veronica Grebenshchikova in Danganronpa Despair Time.
I know, I tend to ramble, and I talk too much about the books and movies that I like, and I say odd things, and I scare people, and... oh, I'm doing it again!
Veronica's purpose in Despair Time is multifaceted and can have many interpretations. First off, let's discuss how Veronica applies to the subversion of Danganronpa tropes that is present in Danganronpa Despair Time. Veronica's Despair Times take on two different tropes, the referencer and the creepy one. The referencer in Danganronpa is the character who throughout the story makes pop culture references, mostly to video games and anime, as Danganronpa is both a video game and anime.
Referencer? I hardly know her.
In Danganronpa, this trope is seen in all of the games in the characters Hifumi Yamada, Chiaki Nanami, and Samuki Shirogane. With these characters, their talent is the primary reason why they are the referencer, with Hifumi being a fanfiction writer, Chiaki being a gamer, and Samuki being a cosplayer. Veronica is no exception to this, as her talent explicitly calls her a fanatic of the horror genre. Over the course of Despair Time, Veronica makes various references to horror films, such as her suggestions to watch The Human Centipede and American Mary with Arturo, which also could be a reference to those YouTube videos like Doctor Reacts to Final Destination, stuff like that. She also watches another movie with Terrico in Chapter 2, Episode 7, and while she never mentions what movie it is, I have a speculation that it was Scream, because of the movie having a female lead who looks nothing like Terrico and having themes of betrayal, with Sydney finding out her boyfriend and his boyfriend, best friend, were the killers the whole time. Also in a very ironic manner, Veronica frequently references the mainline Danganronpa franchise and kind of serves as our constant reminder that Despair Time takes place about 80 years after the events of the first Danganronpa game, Trigger Happy Havoc. The second trope that Veronica follows is the role of the creepy one. This trope is a bit more ambiguous and broad than the referencer, but the creepy one in Danganronpa and Fangans is the character who acts kind of scary or off-putting, whether it is because they have an eerie talent or dress in an aesthetic associated with horror, and or they themselves behave in a sinister manner. More often than not, it's both. For example, there's Celestia, who dresses like a character straight out of Black Butler, who, when she is found guilty of murder, confesses that she wishes to live in a European castle and have pretty men dressed as vampires serve her. She also often freaks out the other students, like when she has no remorse for Leon before he is executed. There's also Correcchio of V3, a folklore-centered anthropologist with a strong interest in the occult who was later revealed to be a serial killer who was killing girls for his dead sister. I won't be going further into Correcchio's character because of how polarizing and problematic everything surrounding him is, but he is an example of the creepy one trope. In fangans, this trope can also be found in characters like Mikado and Kanade from Super Danganronpa Another 2, Marcus from Rocky Restarts, and Seiji from Danganronpa Rebirth, who more fits the eerie talent part of the trope by being an undertaker. Most evidently, the creepy one example is found in the main mastermind of the mainline Danganronpa games, Junko. The scary thing is that Veronica shares a lot of the same feelings and ideas as Junko, as they both dread boredom and both seek out horrifying things to entertain them. Speaking of Veronica's ideology, this is arguably the most important part of her character. Veronica on the surface, while sometimes lacking self-awareness and is frightening to the other students, is seemingly good-hearted and very intelligent. However, she has what tvtropes.org calls blue and orange morality, a moral framework that can't be labeled as exactly good or evil because the character's morals are so detached from human experience. Veronica truly marches to the beat of her own rhythm when it comes to how she views the killing game and the trials, even telling her peers to make the most of the trials in Chapter 2. She believes that the most important thing in her life is to be entertained because she gets bored very easily. This way of thinking is alien to the other Ultimates and is detached from the life or death situation they're all in. This is most evident in what she tells Teriko in Chapter 2, Episode 7, her frequent psychoanalyzing of her peers, and her infatuation with Arturo due to his horrible actions. Despite this, Veronica does seemingly have her limits. After Xander dies, she blames herself for not being attentive, and she was horrified by Min's execution. She also has the fears she mentioned in Chapter 2, Episode 7 that she could possibly make a mistake that will ruin her life. This fear of hers is also shown in the secret quote assigned to her on the Despair Time website attached to the mystery student Mai Akazaki, a girl who didn't foresee the consequences. While acting like she doesn't care about the consequences of creeping everyone out, Veronica is fully aware of how, unlike fiction, in reality every decision you make has a consequence, but she still decides to psychoanalyze everyone and talk about horror 24/7 because it keeps her entertained. Furthermore, Veronica's closest connection in the killing game is with Arturo, arguably the other creepiest character in Despair Time. Veronica's relationship with Arturo is completely one-sided, where Veronica is infatuated by how immoral Arturo really is in his beliefs on appearance in human life, whereas Arturo wants absolutely nothing to do with Veronica and her horror-related antics. Despite this, they balance each other off very well and as a duo, form kind of a blob of traits destined to make people uncomfortable. This makes sense as Arturo is Despair Time's take on the Chapter 3 killer archetype in Danganronpa, as I've mentioned in my past videos, as well as the creep or pervert archetype. Arturo, as seen especially in Chapter 2, acts very inappropriately, especially around Jay. This is very reminiscent of Danganronpa characters like Hifumi, Teru, and Miyu, who are all incredibly perverted and or creepy. While Arturo is a bit different in this manner by being more of an obsessed stalker than a gross pervert, he still fits into this archetype, but subverts it by making it more sinister and violent in his actions. Veronica's infatuation with someone as immoral as Arturo makes perfect sense with her morals of needing to be entertained and never bored. I also strongly suspect that this relationship will soon burst into flames, literally, but more on that later. Moreover, let's discuss how Veronica impacts Teriko in the story of Despair Time as a whole. Veronica is not the most helpful in the trials to say the least, but she once again goes with her own rhythm and is actually quite helpful on her own, just not in the most conventional or best ways. Her purpose during the trial parts of the story is to cause conflict for Teriko and the rest of the characters, but deep down she is quite intelligent and helps in her own way. I think as the story progresses, we will learn a lot more about Veronica, especially once her secret is revealed and it's revealed whose secret she received, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Lastly, I wanted to discuss the interpretation that inspired this video in the first place. Veronica represents us, the audience, the fans. As you may know, I have this little catchphrase, the evil pretty boy, which initially started because of my love of evil fictional men who many people think are attractive, despite the fact that I am not attracted to men. It is mostly a joke that I am a lesbian, yet some of the only men I find pretty are fictional villains. However, this phenomenon of the evil pretty boy has been around longer than this YouTube channel and me coining that term to describe Volo from Pokemon Legends Arceus. When you think of the most popular Danganronpa characters across the franchise, chances are your mind went to the antagonistic trio, Byakuya Togami, Nagito Komaeda, and Kokichi Oma. People love these three despite their immoral values because they bring chaos and conflict to the story, and many find them charming in a way, especially Nagito and Kokichi due to how they communicate with the protagonists of their respective games that could be interpreted as flirting. Personally, I don't like any of the mainline antagonists, but I am not exempt from liking antagonistic characters in this series through fangams. Mikado, Wolfgang, and Teriko are prime examples of this for me. Also, I've addressed my conflicted feelings on David many times on this channel. Like, do I cosplay him? Yes. Do I find his character compelling? Yes. Do I also hate his actions and think he's a manipulative piece of work and have complete vitriol for what he did to Nico and Hu? Yes. Above all else, my morals will always come first, but sadly, not everyone is like that. For example, during the peak of Danganronpa V3's popularity, there was a massive fan sentiment that basically stated that Kokichi did absolutely nothing wrong through the entirety of V3, which, if you know the story of V3, is completely false. Where do we start? Kokichi is a pathological and compulsive liar. He belittles, bullies, and ridicules the other students. He outed Maki as an assassin without her consent, constantly makes inappropriate and hurtful comments towards Kibo, and he manipulated Gonta into killing Miu in Chapter 4, sacrificing Miu and Gonta in the process and pretending to cry when Gonta was brutally executed. Also, don't forget, while this isn't something he directly did, it's more Danganronpa as a whole's fault. The fact that his ultimate talent is offensive in nature and his official art shows him with a hat with an anti-Semitic symbol is enough reason for me to dislike his character. And yet, despite all of the horrible things about Kokichi and what he contributed to the story of V3, he is the fan favorite. But why? Well, the fans during this time kept this sentiment that Kokichi did absolutely nothing wrong and painted him as this little uwu precious boy who loves knockoff grape Fanta, lying, and Suichi, when that is the furthest thing from the truth. Also, in the most pathetic case of life imitating art, Kokichi fans would literally call him an offensive term that was used on Japanese people mostly during World War II when Kokichi is literally a Japanese character. The oftentimes senseless defending and love for Kokichi, Nagito, and Byakuya also provides commentary for the problem of black and white thinking when it comes to liking fictional characters. I'm not telling you that you can't like these characters, just understand that these characters are not perfect and don't need your defense. They're not real. This matter also offers commentary for yet another big issue in the Danganronpa and fangang community, the bias towards male antagonists and the misogynistic nature of discussing female characters, especially ones with antagonistic traits. It's sad that I know for a fact that if Kokichi was a girl, she'd be hated, and this feeling can be credited to none other than Despair Time and the double standards given to Teriko and David. Teriko is distrusting and apathetic about Xander and Min, who betrayed her in severe manners, dying, and she gets hated on in the comments. David manipulates everyone, claims to have caused R.A., who trusted him with her secret, to commit suicide, outs Nico as non-binary through peer pressure, uses Hu's English name against her, which for one is incredibly xenophobic, and two, sparked a lot of bad memories for her, and speaks so poorly about the dead, and he gets to trend on Twitter. Arguably, Teriko is a much better character from a moral standpoint than David, and yet David is loved and Teriko is despised. Veronica's infatuation with David and Arturo is no coincidence. She behaves just like the Danganronpa fans who obsess over the antagonistic, immoral men, and while she does seemingly have interest in picking apart Teriko's psychology, it's not as big as her love for how immoral and awful Arturo and David are. Veronica could be interpreted to symbolize the voice of the audience, and her character begs us to answer the question, why are we entertained by this immorality? Why do we crave the body discoveries, the reveals, the sprites of these characters absolutely losing their minds, the brutal executions? What makes us any better than the killers, the traitors, the masterminds? And why do we feel this hunger to know what will happen next?
Well, I guess I have to end this existential section with some irony, because I'm moving on to my predictions for Veronica's character.
I wouldn't be so optimistic. Even if you're lucky enough to survive this killing game, I'm sure that your experience here will still damage you permanently. You'll spend the rest of your life consumed by the carnage you witnessed and all the lives you failed to save. Oh my, what's with that look on your face? Am I wrong?
Since Veronica's story is not over yet, I wanted to talk about some popular theories as well as my predictions for what will happen to Veronica. First off, let's discuss something I've already discussed on my channel. What is Veronica's secret, and why is she refusing to state whose secret she received? From the consensus I've gotten from the Despair Time fanbase, a majority of people agree with my prediction that Veronica's secret is the one who received. You only took on your talent to distract from your incessant need to harm yourself for fun. As seen in Chapter 2, Episode 7, it becomes clear that horror media is how Veronica comforts herself and could potentially be a coping mechanism for her to help her with trauma and/or mental health issues. In addition, Veronica's secret quote on the Despair Time Tumblr reads, "Once something is broken, it can never be pieced together in quite the same way again." The same goes for people. This quote is possibly implying that Veronica sees herself as broken, which is further supported by her talking about her real fear of making a fatal mistake she can't fix in Chapter 2, Episode 7. However, horror turns her fear into excitement and keeps her from getting bored or sad, which further shows how important her talent is to her as a person. As far as to why Veronica won't reveal the secret she received, it seems on the surface that she kept the identity of the secret she received to cause conflict and to lengthen the trial since she states that she enjoys them, but I think there's more to it than that. First off, the secret she got is incredibly serious, and anyone with a decent moral compass would not tell this kind of secret to a bunch of people. Despite the fact that throughout this video I've touched on how Veronica is not the most morally good person, she has been shown to have her limits, like when she blamed herself for Xander's death. I think it's a possibility that Veronica knows the consequences of exposing someone's secret as personal as the one she received and won't expose it, but is masking her reasoning behind her need to be entertained. This would also make Veronica's statement about the consequences of life and her fear of making an irreparable mistake much more important to the story. It's also not mentioned if Veronica reached out to the person whose secret she received to talk to them about it, so it's unclear if they would be okay with Veronica sharing it. This leads me to two theories. If you've seen my video essay about David's reveal, you know that I theorized that the secret Veronica received belongs to Who, due to her saying she must be needed and feel useful, so she takes on the motherly role she does in the Killing Game. However, I have this new theory that I'm not 100% on, but in short, there's a possibility that the secret could actually belong to Tereko because of her mentioning how painful a failed hanging attempt is, and that in Chapter 2, Episode 7, when Veronica creeps up behind Tereko, she could have actually wanted to tell Tereko that she got her secret but never got the chance to tell her. Now, what could this mean for the other secrets then? Well, to explain the theory, I think Whit is the mastermind and lied about his secret, and Whose secret is actually the one about losing her mom. Whit's secret would then be, the Killing Game is your fault. However, right now this is just a theory in my head and will most likely be absolutely wrong. Finally, let's discuss what will happen to Veronica in the upcoming chapters. To start with the fans' consensus of her character, a majority of speculators I've seen have pegged her to be a killer, more specifically the Chapter 3 or Chapter 5 killer. The reason a lot of the fans predict her being the Chapter 3 killer is basically the same reasoning as why many predict Arturo as the Chapter 3 killer, because they fit the trope of a Chapter 3 killer in Danganronpa, uneasy, compelling, and insane enough to kill more than one person for a selfish reason. I've even seen someone go as far as to say Veronica will kill 3 people, with this person saying she will gouge out Rose's eyes, cut off Charles's ears, and rip out David's throat in a sadistic version of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I've also seen people say that Veronica will be the final killer and that she will kill a character important to the story like David or Charles. There has been no reasoning for why she'd be the final killer. My theory for if she were to be the Chapter 5 killer goes back to her need to be entertained. She could potentially become so bored that she decides to commit her own murder, and it's an incredibly elaborate setup, and her victim will be killed in an incredibly gory way.
Like, I mean John Kramer style elaborate gore.
This honestly would be very fascinating and fit with the subversion theme of Despair Time, as the Chapter 5 murder is always the most elaborate. So it would be an interesting change if, instead of it being elaborate for the sake of being impossible to solve and end the Killing Game, it was elaborate so Veronica could have the most fun seeing everyone try to solve the murder she caused. It would also be even more fascinating and ironic if she killed Charles for this case because he is afraid of blood, and I just know Veronica would give him the most bloody, excruciating death if she were to kill him. I could also see her having a friend excitement and being excited about her execution, but deep down she is terrified of death because death to her could mean nothingness and thus boredom. Mana TV would then give her an execution similar to the burning of the Versailles Witch from Trigger Happy Havoc, where Veronica believes she is getting an execution perfect for her talent as the ultimate horror fanatic, but at the last minute she is struck by boredom and dies. I'll lay out an idea for her execution I had. This execution would be called Tower of Terror and would feature Veronica in an amusement park setting. She goes on multiple horror-related rides and is having the time of her life. Well, death. But then goes on a drop tower, Tower of Terror type ride. She's going up, anticipating the big drop when all of a sudden, the ride stops. She's left at the top of the ride for a long time, making her incredibly bored. And then reality kicks in, the ride drops and breaks, and she dies from the impact. If Veronica is actually a culprit in Despair Time, I doubt that her execution will be anything like this, but it's still an interesting idea I wanted to share. But the funny thing is, I don't even think Veronica is going to be a culprit. My prediction for Veronica is that she will get quite a bit of character development in the daily life of Chapter 3, and then will be one of the victims of Chapter 3. This hypothesis was mostly born from the fact that Veronica being the Chapter 3 killer seemed too obvious to me, so the most realistic way, in my opinion, to subvert that part of her character would be to make her one of the victims of the double murder chapter. As far as who would be killed alongside her and who the murderer would be, I predict that the second victim of Chapter 3 would be none other than Arturo, with the characters learning more about him in Chapter 3 as well, and the murder would possibly be Jay for the purpose of getting revenge on Arturo, but I could see it being either one of the characters who I think killed R.A., who, or Levi. Depending on who ends up being R.A.'s killer, then the other one could possibly be the double murder culprit, but nonetheless, I personally think Veronica is going to die in Chapter 3 as a victim, but we'll have to wait and see just how the story unfolds.
If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the bell for notifications. Comment down below your thoughts on Veronica's character or anything about Despair Time, or for a question of the video, what is your favorite horror movie? Because I've got a video coming soon about a certain horror movie that, like Despair Time, involves games. To answer my own question, my favorite horror movies are Crimson Peak and Hereditary. But I want to hear from you. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much.